Welcome back to Running Strong. My name is Will Frantz, and if you enjoy this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you would share it with somebody, or even better, subscribe. It tells the robots that run our lives that more people want to hear it, which gets it out and hopefully shares better information. Anyway, today we're figuring out how to keep making this thing with a busy schedule. I'm looking to move soon so that I can have access to a yard, or so that I can have a yard, so that my dog will have access to a yard. I think it's probably a more accurate way to put it. It's not that I dislike my apartment, it's just trying to give him a better place to be. So looking to move in addition to the newish job and figuring out the role there, as well as all the other stuff, and just figuring it all out. So today we're recording a podcast in a car as I head to the gym to do deadlifts and then climb a little later with a friend. And I was talking, first I was hearing largely on the Roche's podcast, but on a couple podcasts lately, about a recent, I believe it's a meta-analysis of some speed training, or speed-like training. It basically is they're calling it speed endurance. And it's just this notion that if people who run long distances have some amount of significantly faster stuff, in this instance we're looking at something like strides or surges, where you're pushing for 30, 40, 45 seconds at a time with rest in between, then ultimately that leads to you getting remarkably faster. And I think that was really the takeaway from the study, is that the impact is pretty outsized, especially for the time that you put in. So if you only ever run slow because you're very focused on running longer distances, things like marathons and ultras, where you just really don't like to do speed work, well, it doesn't take a lot to make a difference, is the takeaway of the study, which honestly isn't that big of a surprise. Coaches have been doing these things for decades, and there's probably a reason, right? And this is where we talk about how research can lag behind, and we don't always have perfect evidence for things that do seem to make a difference. And this would be exactly one of those things. We finally see time and time again in this research study where strides, surges, and really short bursts of speed help you go faster in long endurance events and help you maintain just your stamina better in long endurance events. And it hasn't necessarily been proven as much in the past, but we've been doing it forever. And this is a good notion. This is a good thing to point out, that most of us would benefit from a little bit of the opposite thing, right? The bigger conversation here, or that's represented here, is that a little bit of submaximal but still very intense work, right? You're running for 30 seconds at a time at a mile to 5K speed or something like that, right? It's not a sprint. It's not all out. You don't finish that 30 seconds and say, whoosh, I couldn't go another step. I'm totally fucked up. But you do finish it feeling like you did work, and then you take a pretty substantial rest, usually a minute, minute and a half, 2 minutes, reset and do it again. If you're doing surges, then you're going to keep running, but that rest will just be easy or recovery pace. And if you're doing strides, it might be a standing rest. But these are not all out. These are not sprints. These are not full speed, but they are fast, because a mile or 5K speed is fast. And if we look at the overall picture, just a little bit of pretty much the opposite, short of sprinting, this is about as opposite as you could get. And I would personally argue that sprinting would also probably be really good for endurance athletes, but it comes at a higher risk because it is a different running form, and it requires different muscular engagement, And especially if we're trying to do things that involve like hard starts, you're more likely to get hurt. But things like strides and surges, pretty low risk ratio, very honestly, if you do them properly, and can make a big difference because it's just a little bit of the opposite thing, right? Like when we're training, if we spend all of our time doing one thing, if we do even a little bit of the opposite thing, then we are very likely to see a ton of progress, because most adaptations, most stimuli are going to be on kind of a logarithmic curve, meaning that you're going to start like a little bit of stimulus is going to make a big difference, and then a little more is going to make a slightly less difference, and then over time you're going to really start to see this hard plateau. And it doesn't mean that more wouldn't create more, like more stimulus wouldn't create more progress, but every little bit more, or the more you add, the less progress you're making by like increment, right? So we see this with even endurance running. If you do 20 to 30 minutes in zone 2, massive benefits to your aerobic system. If you do 50 to 60 minutes in zone 2, still pretty massive benefits to your aerobic system. Somewhere on the 90-minute to 2-hour mark, depending on you and your fitness, those aerobic benefits start to massively plateau. You don't get as much of them anymore. And on the other hand, you get a shitload of fatigue. So you're not getting as much benefit per time spent, and you're getting a lot of fatigue. So the risk to reward ratio is really low. This is going to be true for most training, where even a very small amount is going to make a big change. And then at some point, you're going to start to flip the risk to reward ratio where you aren't able to recover and you're risking a lot of injury for not as much benefit. But all that to say that a little bit of everything is probably a great way to make progress, because if you're doing none of a particular type of training, then only a very small amount would be required to see some level of progress. So this is where we're going to see things like speed training for endurance athletes, as we've already talked about. We also see this on the opposite end. I talk with a lot of people, athletes, whatever, at the tennis club about getting faster because they're curious and they want to increase their speed. And this is where we see the exact opposite. They want to do speed drills, they want to do lateral speed work, they want to run up and down the tennis court, but none of them do zone 2, and as a result they aren't getting any faster because their aerobic base is not existent, really. And if they would just do a couple hours of cardio every week, which granted for the general populace is a lot, but these people are playing hours of tennis every week, it wouldn't be that big of an additive. They could even drop a session of tennis and do a session of cardio, and I almost guarantee that they would get better at tennis, right? This is also where we see things like people who don't do any strength training. If you add one session per week, you're going to get massive benefits because it's at least some stimulus. It doesn't need to be perfect. It does need to be difficult. It does need to be heavy enough to create like a stimulus to push that adaptation. But you don't need to do 4 sessions a week. I do because I enjoy it, and it allows me to experiment with more stuff in the gym, which at the end of the day is the thing that pays my rent. But if you don't want to do that and you just want to get stronger so that you're a more resilient runner, then great. 1 session a week would be perfectly fine. 2 would be even better. And then 3 is probably too much, if we're being honest. Most of the people I coach, we do 2 sessions of strength per week, and that's plenty. Some of them we even just do 1, then a little extra core work and some plyos or something, right? Like there's multiple ways to run it. We also see this with stretching, right? Like if you don't stretch at all, then if you stretch correctly a little bit, we tend to see big benefits. I see like there's a whole conversation on stretching when it comes to athletes, and how stiff muscles can kind of make you faster, right? Like it keeps your hamstring like a leaf spring, but there's a limit to that. Like I have some people come in and when they bend over at the waist, if they don't round their back, they can't reach past their knees. That's not good, right? Like that feels like too much. And even if it did make you faster, we really not want to be able to reach the ground to pick stuff up without like leveraging into our back. Probably not, right? So we have this like trade-off that we constantly need to be considering in terms of benefits. And then we see things that definitely don't need to be tight, like your rectus femoris, one of your many hip flexors. Often people end up with this pain in the front of their hip when they run a lot and they do a lot of uphill or speed training because this thing is constantly driving through. And if it's just a little looser, it doesn't need, it's able to recover a little better, right? So like we could just do a couch stretch a couple times a week. And you do need to hold it long enough. This is what I mean by doing it correctly. It's the same thing with strength training. It needs to be, the stimulus still needs to be the right stimulus. But if you do that, it doesn't need to be a lot of total volume throughout the week in order for you to see progress, in order to make progress, in order to get the benefits of these things that we're trying to do. So if you only run slow and you want to get faster, then just spend a little time running faster. And the easiest way to do that is going to be what we see in these like speed endurance studies where we're doing things like strides and surges for 20 to 30 to 40 second repeats. And you're only doing like 4 to 6 of them during a workout or during a training session a couple times a week. And if we do that, we're going to see a lot of outsized benefit on our speed and eventual ability to make progress as runners. Hope that was helpful. If you have any questions on where your gaps may be or what you're looking for, like please shoot me a message somewhere and I'm happy to chat with you about it. And if you want a little more input, then we could figure out a way to set up an actual call. Hope you have a great day and I'll talk to you later.